All right, I am coming to you by popular demand with a recap of Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis Part 1. I know some people have read it, and since I can't be in class with you, I'm going to give you my summary and some key points, just the way we'd usually do it, if I was in room 204 with you. So let's get started. First off, Gregor Samsa wakes up, and at first he doesn't realize that he's turned into an insect. And he knows something's different. The best way I can equate it is almost like, in 7th and 8th grade, like when you go through puberty and you're like all weird and like gross and stuff, and like you trip over your own feet and everything.
Yeah,
so
I remember.
He wakes up and he knows something's different because he can't just whip the blankets off because he doesn't have human arms. He's got these little insect arms. And again, if you see an insect crawling around, pay attention to that. Obviously, their body is a whole lot larger than the 6 legs that they have. So he's got to grow into knowing how to use his body to be able to even get out of bed. All right, so I'm just going to go page by page through this, starting with the first page. I printed out part 1. I'll do the same for parts 2 and 3, but we'll just start with this now. So he looks around his room. Everything's normal. The picture on the wall, his work stuff is over on the desk. And he starts thinking about, maybe I'm really tired because my job sucks and, I probably wore myself out. And then he starts thinking about his job. And he's like, nobody appreciates me, and there's like the job, the boss who has his snitch, and he's, so he's going over his job like maybe some of you have, where you're not appreciated for all you do. And then he thinks about his family, and he thinks to himself, if I didn't have to keep this job for my family, I would have quit a long time ago and told them all to go scratch. So then his mother realizes something is wrong. All right, let's just get the basic here. There are 4 members of the family. There is the mother, the father, Gregor, and his sister, Greta. And he's the only one who works. They can all work, but he's the only one who works. So he's a good son, and...
You know about that.
So his mother realizes that he hasn't left at the crack of dawn to catch his train to go to work. So she calls out nicely, it's 6:45, don't you want to be on your way? And he tries to answer her, but now he's got a bug voice that's kind of muffled through the door. So nobody thinks anything's wrong. Kind of like when somebody wakes you up and you're like, they're like, okay, they're awake. Nobody knows what's going on yet, not even him. So then the father
So basically, he sounds like Carbone.
So the father starts knocking on the door. It says weakly with his fist. Now, I had you look at that biography of Kafka, and all throughout Metamorphosis, you see a weak mother who's kind of like a drama queen, and the father who gets progressively more violent and intolerant of his son. So then the sister knocks lightly, and she's really got her brother's back at first. And she asks, Gregor, do you need anything? Are you all right? So she starts off, being very caring to him. Next page. Okay. So he's still trying to navigate how to even get out of bed. It's almost like, those sumo costumes they have, like, like ball fields and stuff, or, for fun, and like it's hard to move around. It's almost like you had one of those on and you had to like get yourself up off the floor. It's really difficult, and now you have to navigate how to move. So he realizes he's late for work and he's in a lot of trouble. Now get this scenario. Let's say that you're working a job and you have to be at the office, or you have to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. Could you imagine if it's 9 a.m. and your parents, everybody's knocking on your bedroom door, and then your boss comes to your house and your boss wants to know what's up, and your boss is now there and everybody wants to talk to you? That's what's happening with him. So the boss comes by to make sure everything is okay, because this is so unlike Gregor. I mean, the kid never takes a sick day. And he hears the manager's voice, and now he gets nervous, and he falls out of bed. This is where he gets his first minor injury. Pay attention, because he accumulates a lot of injuries during this story. Physical and psychological, but the physical ones, those are the ones you really want to pay attention to. So here's the first one. It says, the fall was absorbed somewhat by the carpet. For that reason, the dull noise was not quite so conspicuous, but he had not held his head up with sufficient care and had hit it. He turned his head, irritated and in pain, and rubbed it on the carpet. So he's trying to please people, and he injures himself in the process. And then they hear that thud, and the manager says, something fell in that room. And then the sister kind of hooks him up, and she's like, your boss is here. Hurry up, get out. Then the father says, Mr. Manager has come and is asking why you have not left on the early train. So please open the door. Now the father is all nice and decent when someone's around.
I wish I knew the feeling.
In front of the manager, he's nice as pie. He's like, oh, son, it's time to get up. But he changes when the manager leaves. So
Dad,
watch
come back.
for that. So the manager starts out and he says, good morning, Mr. Samsa. And he wants to know what's up, why he hasn't been at work. And then the mother all of a sudden starts to just babble about, oh, my son works all the time and he has no life and no social life. And all he does is read magazines and cut out pictures and hang them on his wall. And she babbles. I don't know why. Maybe she's nervous. So Gregor's like, I'm coming. And he's trying to, get himself prepared to tell everybody, everything's fine. The sister is crying. The women in this story are, again, they're like drama queens. They're weak. They cry. It's kind of, dare I say, manipulative. They just, like people who faint and it's just all fake and everything. It's like crocodile tears. So she's crying. And
what is crocodile tears?
Crocodile tears is fake crying, Paul.
I don't get the...
Okay.
What?
On to the next page. Now the manager's getting impatient, and so he threatens Gregor with his job. And he says, your position is not at all the most secure. He's like, I intended to mention it to you privately, but since I'm here wasting my time, it's like, I'm going to call you out in front of your parents and embarrass you. Now, Gregor is trying like hell to get out of bed and to just make sure everybody knows that he's coming, he's going to work, everything's fine. So onward to the next page. The mother is crying again because Gregor's not coming out. The manager's getting pissed. The father's getting pissed. And the two women are crying. And nobody knows what's going on. And then the manager says, that was an animal's voice. Not a dog. So he's the first one to notice something's up. And something's wrong or different coming from behind that bedroom door. So he is, next page, he's trying feverishly to open the door. And this is where the second injury comes in. It says, Gregor pushed himself slowly towards the door with the help of the easy chair. It's kind of like a walker almost. He's pushing himself. He's holding on to it. Now, there's a key. It's a skeleton key. It's a metal key, and he's got to open it. Well, guess what? If you have little insect fingers, paws, whatever, little sticker suction cups, you can't do it. We don't have thumbs, articulating thumbs and fingers.
They're called limbs, Mom.
To make up for that, his jaws were naturally very strong. With their help, he managed to get the key really moving. Second injury. He didn't notice that he was obviously inflicting some damage on himself, for a brown fluid came out of his mouth, flowed over the key, and dripped onto the floor. Don't forget the dramatic irony here. We know he's an insect. No one else does. So the big reveal is imminent. And that door's going to come flying open. And an insect, yes, a human-sized insect. It's not like a stink bug's going to walk out and it's like, what's up? Like a 6-foot insect is going to walk out. And nobody knows what is behind that door, but we do. So keep that in mind. Okay.
As they used to call me, 6-foot
So,
insect.
the door opens and he peeks his head, and the manager exclaimed aloud, "Oh!" And now he saw him nearest to the door, pressing his hand against his open mouth and moving slowly back. So the manager's like, "Oh." And he starts to back away. His mother, in spite of the presence of the manager, she was standing here with her hair sticking up on end. She faints. She collapses. Now, watch what the father does. His father clenched his fist with a hostile expression, as if he wanted to push Gregor back into his room, then looked uncertainly around the living room, covered his eyes with his hands, and cried so that his mighty breast shook. Feels sorry for himself.
Wait, what? His mighty what?
So then, Gregor comes out, and he says, "I'll get dressed right away, pack up the collection of samples, and set off." He figures he's going to work. Doesn't dawn on him that he's an insect, because again, he doesn't think of himself. He wants to make everybody happy. So he's like, I'm on it. I'm going to get on the train. I'll be to work. I'm sorry I'm late. Everything's good. I'll make it up to you. It's all fine. Next page. The manager starts to leave. And he can't let that happen because there will be hell to pay if that happens. But the manager is like freaked out, like, obviously. So he's figuring that the mother and the sister can maybe tell him, no, hold on. He'll be there in a second. So he leaves, and it says the manager momentarily had disappeared completely from his mind. At the sight, this is really funny. Kafka, this is a screwed up story, but there are some really funny parts. Okay, toward the end of the first part, the mother, there's a coffee pot on the table and somebody bumped it, and it's like spilled over and just like pouring onto the floor. So the manager had disappeared completely from his mind. At the sight of the flowing coffee, Gregor couldn't stop himself, snapping his jaws in the air a few times. He's like, Mom, coffee, Mom, the coffee. So imagine like a pincher bug or an insect, like an ant with those, mandibles. And he's like, Mom, the coffee's spilling. And then she screams and faints again. And the manager's like, gone. Now, he's going to deal with his father. Unfortunately, this flight of the manager also seemed to bewilder his father completely. Okay, we're almost done with part one.
Give me that shit.
Be ready for the next injury. All right. So his father, picking up a large newspaper from the table and stamping his feet on the floor, he set out to drive Gregor back into his room by waving the cane in the newspaper. So he's almost like a lion tamer. He's like shooing him back into his room. No matter how willing he was to turn his head respectfully, Gregor, his father just stomped all the harder with his feet. So he wants him to get out of his sight because he's pissed and he doesn't know what's going on, and he just wants this insect, this thing, to get away from him. So he's shooing it back into the room. Now, there's a problem. It's kind of like putting a square peg in a round hole. Gregor, if you look at an insect's body, it's wide. It's almost like a beetle. He can't fit back into the door. So here comes the next injury and the last one of this chapter, or this part. If only his father had not hissed so unbearably, which is interesting because a cockroach hisses. So Kafka does that intentionally to make it that the father's acting more like an animal or a creature than Gregor. So his father is hissing at him, and he's trying to get him out of his sight and back into his room so he can not look at him anymore. It became clear his body was too wide to go any further. Behind Gregor, the sound at this point was no longer like the voice of only a single father. Now it was really no longer a joke. And Gregor forced himself, come what might, into the door. One side of his body was lifted up. He lay at an angle in the door opening. His one flank was sore with the scraping. So he can't fit, so he wedges himself in, and he's injuring himself as he's being shoved through the door. The tiny legs on one side hung twitching in the air above, and the ones on the other side were pushed painfully into the floor. So the legs are kind of, the ones that are up in the air are like this, and the other ones are like all jammed into the floor. Then his father gave him one really strong, liberating push from behind, and he scurried, bleeding severely, far into the interior of his room. The door was slammed shut with the cane, and finally it was quiet. Out of sight, out of mind. But nobody cared that he was injured. The father injured him, and the father uses the cane to slam the door shut. So is he a creature, or is he still his son? And that's what remains to be seen as we get into part 2. So, part 2 is due today, actually tomorrow. It's due on Thursday. And I'll do another one of these videos for part 2. And I will warn you that some of you are going to, if you don't already have a distaste for this family, you are going to probably hate them more and more as they go along, because they are absolute trash. They're awful. They're awful people. They're lazy. They're just awful people. And as you read it, you have to keep your own ruling going. Is he still a person, or is he an insect? And if you read Frankenstein last year, the parallels are there. Is he a creature, or is he a human soul who has feelings and who loves? So, hope you enjoyed this, and I will talk to you later. Take care.